Good morning. It is 8:43. We are having a community forum meeting in lieu of the scheduled Public Safety Commission meeting. And so we don't need to necessarily take a roll call, but in attendance are Commissioner Watson, Commissioner Damaris, Commissioner G, Council Member Cacciati. Should we just jump right in, Chief Zielinski?
Just for the residents that will be listening or watching from home, we do not have a quorum today. I just want to reiterate, this is not an official Public Safety Commission meeting, but a community forum meeting due to the quorum issue. And as that dictates what we are allowed and not allowed to do, we are going to present the police department's annual report this morning. It is an agendized item. However, there will be a discussion, but no action taken on it. So it is an informational item only. And with that, good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. The intention behind presenting the South Pasadena Police Department's annual report is to offer both you, the commission, and our public a comprehensive understanding of the local crime landscape, but also within the broader regional context. So this report should serve as a means to illuminate the ongoing efforts by our dedicated personnel who are working diligently day in and day out to keep the city safe. And furthermore, the report is also a critical analysis and helps the police department in steering our efforts towards addressing both crime trends and areas of concern, as well as quality of life issues. And this entails a focused approach on how we achieve our objectives, but we also put a lot of emphasis on the evolving demographics of our community as it changes both in population and economics and so forth. So each of you should have received a copy of this report, and it's also been made accessible to the public via our department's website. This morning's presentation will offer a comprehensive summary of the crime trends. And so given that we're not going to do a detailed analysis of the report page by page, as it tells a lot of information on the day-to-day operations of the police department, our community relations and whatnot. But this morning, we'll focus specifically on the crime trends. Go into a little bit of the crime trends and how we come up with our analysis. The FBI has what they call the Uniform Crime Reporting Standards, and that is a measure of crimes. There's 8 crimes that they believe are the most common and the crimes that are most likely to be reported by victims to the police or to law enforcement, and then the crimes that are categorized by law enforcement and enable, I want to say, easier for law enforcement to track. Now, recently, the FBI changed uniform crime reporting to national incident-based reporting, and really what that means is they took UCR, they added a couple more crimes to it, so it does change the statistics. If you're trying to compare from previous years, there are more crimes this year. These, both the UCR, Uniform Crime Reporting, and the National Incident, which we call NIBRs, neither of those are mandatory. So it's participatory only by law enforcement. It's up to the individual agencies. South Pasadena has always participated in it. But when you try to compare them nationally, you just have to keep in mind that it is not mandatory. Now, the FBI encourages law enforcement to participate, and one of the ways they do that is by limiting funding to federal funding if you do not participate. So I don't have the statistics as far as how many do or don't. I know majority of law enforcement, just for the funding perspective, do participate. So going to that, we have a and I will go over, this is just a little bit about the police department and where we are today. As of 2022, in the latest budget, we're authorized for 37 full-time sworn employees, 17 civilian. We have 6 part-time employees, 1 reserve, and 2 volunteers. Now, that is optimal. That is at our full staff. Obviously, today, we do not have that full staffing. We have 8 vacancies in the sworn position. One of those is a recruit that we have sent to the academy. So technically, we have 7, but he will not graduate the academy for 6 months. And then there's roughly another 6 months of field training before that officer can actually go out in the field and respond to calls by himself. We have 4 civilian positions and 3 part-time positions that are vacant as well. To add to that, We also have our long-term injuries, and those are positions that are on the books that we can't fill until those individuals come back to work or make a determination on what their medical status is. And if you look, we have 4 sworn employees, so 4 police officer positions that are long-term vacancies with injuries, and then 1 civilian. See if we can, there we go. Okay, there we go. If we're looking at arrests and we're looking at adults right here, arrests are down. So when we looked at 2020, we had 509 adult arrests, and then in 2022, 345. So we're starting to see a little bit of a dip in that. And what I want to talk about first is when we talk about crime trends, we talk about arrest trends, there's many different things that point to why that's happening. I'm not the expert, and I think there's a lot of debate amongst scholars and legal analysts on why crime trends are up or down, and same thing with the rest. What we are seeing is, and I'll tell you this firsthand, is we're seeing a change in our community, certainly in Los Angeles County, on what is prosecutable crimes as opposed to what is not these days. So I think that has a little bit to play in it. We're seeing a lot more cases go into diversion as opposed to in custody. And so all those things combined, I think, make for the trend the way it is. And we can talk about it at the end of the report if you have any questions. Total calls for service. As we're seeing, we had 2022, we had 52,639 calls for service. So a little bit of a drop. And same thing for calls for service dispatched. So the difference between 52,639 calls coming in for service, that is something that requires some sort of police assistance, some sort of police response, as opposed to the 24,500 just below that. That is 24,500 calls that we actually sent an officer to someone's house or required a more significant response. So we track when someone comes to the front counter and needs police assistance, or when they call on the phone, if we can answer that via the phone or an email, that goes into that top number of 52,000. And then the 24,000 is a little more significant, where it takes some time or an actual personnel to respond to a home. I think that's significant looking at the historically from South Pasadena. If we look at 1960, very similar population size, but 1960 we had 12,000 calls for service. So we're jumping up significantly, and we expect to do that. I'm sure trends will continue to rise as we get more of the traveling population coming through South Pasadena, as we start looking at different building structures in the community where we're starting to go up as opposed to out. We're certainly going to see more calls for service. Some of those are quality of life calls for service. Some of them are assistance, and certainly some of those are crime trends. Even our 911 calls dipped a little bit this year. What I want to point out, though, is when you're talking about numbers like South Pasadena, a slight dip in terms of calls for service or crime trends can make a significant difference if we're talking only about percentages. So when you see the percentages, yes, they're important, but I would actually ask you to focus more on the actual numbers as opposed to percentages, because sometimes those percentages can be misleading. Traffic collisions, we saw a spike in traffic collisions, and not a surprise. I think all of us have seen a difference in people. We've talked about it here in the way people drive, certainly during COVID and then after COVID. So our injury collisions went down a little bit from 91 to 77, but then you look at our non-injury, which are the majority of our collisions, they went up 50 to 278 from 228. And then our hit and runs jumped up another 20. So significant, only 20 collisions, difference on some of those, but in terms of percentages, it showed a much higher volume. Traffic citations were up for parking citations, and it shows 2020, 2021, and 2022. Parking citations is the majority of what they write. And then moving citations there in the gray, or I'm sorry, in the blue, remained fairly consistent throughout 2020 and 2022. 2021, they jumped a bit. One of the reasons why the traffic citations were down is we lost 2 officers from our traffic unit from long-term injuries. So those individuals are still out. So that traffic unit is now down to 1. That 1 officer has now been pulled from traffic to fill in the vacancies for patrol. So there's no one dedicated to that. So we expected to see those decline. Hopefully in the next year, as we continue our efforts to increase our recruiting, that we'll be able to put those officers back in that unit, and then we'll see those enforcement efforts increase. As you see, the top citations for 2022 are distracted driving with the cell phone use and texting. That still is a significant issue. And then stop sign and speeding, which those correlate to the complaints that we typically get from the public asking when they ask for more enforcement. As I mentioned, we transitioned in March of 2022 from the UCR crime reporting to NIBARS, which is not real significant, but it does add 2 more crime categories to the data that we collect. And then here's the overall. Those are our Part 1 crimes. And then if you look at the biggest issue at the bottom over to the far right is we had a 13% increase in crime. And as I mentioned, we went from our high of 722 Part 1 crimes in 2020 to 651 Part 1 crimes in 2022. Really not a significant jump, less than 100. But if you're looking at percentages, because the numbers are so small, it shows a 13% increase. Overall, these from 2010 to 2022, these are our Part 1 crimes. And if you look, they kind of ebb and flow. There's some high years, some low years, but they really stay pretty static in between high 500, almost 600 to our peak in 2015 at 802. So we are right about in the middle and consistent with what we've seen over the last decade. With that, that is the end of the report for the crime statistics, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Chief, if you could maybe explain a little bit more, when we're talking about the rise in crime and how many arrests are made, when you had the slide with the number of arrests, how does the number of arrests kind of correspond to the amount of crime?
Sure.
Is more arrests more crime, or is it vice versa?
That would be the common sense thought, but there's so much going on right now. So we have a number of different things playing out. We have people that were calling the police quite frequently and for a number of different issues. We went to where those people were not calling the police. There's a push not to call the police and either handle it through other means, other non-law enforcement means. So we saw some deviation there. We're seeing some deviation with what is arrestable offenses now. We can talk about the drug laws. We can talk about some of the quality of life issues that we're seeing. And then certainly prosecutable offenses. And that's kind of what I meant. Los Angeles County, the district attorney has come up with an internal set of policies on what they will or will not prosecute. So that is also playing into effect on what officers are arresting or not arresting. There's some discretion there by the officers on whether to make the arrest. And that some of that is based off of internal policies that the district attorney has set forth. There's jail staffing issues and housing issues. So certain issues, if you're not familiar with last Sunday, I believe, October 1st, the county instituted a 0 bail policy. And that was, unless it was a violent crime, that individuals would be either cited in the field or booked and then immediate released with a citation, as opposed to being held in custody for, depending on whether it's a misdemeanor or felony, up to 48 hours before arraignment. So now those individuals, let's say for your shoplifting or your residential burglary or vehicle burglary, where they would have been in custody for 48 hours waiting arraignment, now they're being released immediately after booking. That's it. That was a policy set forth by the courts, and the county has implemented that. So all those things play into what is affecting South Pasadena and how the police respond. So when we're looking at that, there's a lot. I can't point to one specific thing because there's so much happening with that, and we're still waiting to see how these policies and procedures play into our community. There's different data. There's different studies that are going on to analyze that, to determine how that's affecting crime. Are we seeing a higher rate of recidivism? It certainly appears that we are, but I don't have the data to back that up. We're waiting to see overall what the county's gonna put out. There's a number of different studies. I will tell you that it's pretty highly publicized as of last week when the 0 bail came out. I think 19 different cities filed suit against the county in the courts for that. So waiting to see how that transitions and what comes out of that. So we're in this unique state where we're moving forward, but yet really our hands are tied and we're waiting to see what the court's going to come up with on how we're going to proceed. It's challenging at best. And what I'd ask the community is to, if there's concerns, obviously, please continue to call the police. That's what we're here for. But to educate themselves and to ask questions so that they're aware of what's going on and can make better informed decisions.
Thank you.
I'm wondering, I'm looking at the organizational chart, and I think last year when we had a similar presentation, I asked about gender diversity for the fire department and the police department. And I'm wondering if any of at that point, I don't think we had 0 women sworn officers. And I'm wondering if that's still, and 0 in the fire department too. So basically 0.
So for the
across
police
your city.
department, we had 2 then, and we still have 2. Our goal is to increase that. I think some of that's going to be addressed in the upcoming police department assessment. I believe we narrowed that down to November 13th.
Yep.
Yes. November 13th, we'll have a special meeting with the Public Safety Commission and City Council where that'll be addressed. That's something we've really tried hard to focus on. One of the challenges, whether it's gender diversity or just diversity all the way around, is we are competing with all the other municipalities and certainly the county and state for those same qualified applicants. So it really becomes challenging. It's a bidding war on finding those applicants. So we need to come up with, we're working internally on how we can best market South Pasadena and the great things that we have here to make it appealing for new hires. So something we're committed to, we're working on, but it is definitely a long-term process.
Well, I'm glad that we have 2, so I take that back. That's good.
Commissioner G has her hand raised on Zoom.
Yes. Commissioner G. Commissioner G, do you have a question?
I do. So my question is whether the mental health team, including social workers, is part of the org chart. Is that something that we use for mental health calls?
Yeah, so the mental health team is not part of the org chart. That is a contract, so we don't include that as part of the org chart. But yes, we utilize them daily, not only to help supplement our response, but also to provide those long-term resources for individuals suffering with either mental health, homelessness, or addiction.
And how many people are part of that team?
I believe there's 3. There's 1 clinician and 2 assistants.
Mm-hmm.
But that's strictly referring to the San Gabriel mental health team. That is not including our assets or resources with LA County Department of Mental Health.
So they're contracted. Are we looking towards anything about hiring some as part of our team? Because contracted, we might not have as much accessibility, or do we have that accessibility where contracting is fine?
No, we have the accessibility when we contract it with them. That is part of the contract. It's built in on their response time and their availability. I know as more cities are looking at South Pasadena, remember this is a trial project. So as the success of this program is highlighted and we continue to move forward, obviously more cities are looking at joining on, and that'll obviously allow the vendor to look at their staffing and hire accordingly. So we have not had any issues as far as getting that team out to assist us. There are 2 days, I believe, currently that they are not responding, and that was discussed when we initially negotiated the contract. And to fill that gap, we use the LA County Department of Mental Health. As you may or may not be aware, we have 1 mental health clinician that is assigned to the city during those days, and they're available 24/7 on call out. We've worked with the mental health team from LA County. I want to say they've been a partner with us for about 10 years at least. And so the San Gabriel Valley mental health team, they're fairly new. We contracted with them last year, And it's been a great success, but like anything with a pilot project, we're monitoring it. We're constantly making new recommendations for either increased staffing or shorter response times, but that is certainly a work in progress. And as I mentioned, as they move forward and more cities are looking at adopting that model, I would expect to see their staffing level increase as well. And I will also add, just for your information and the rest of the commission, is that so far South Pasadena has been very fortunate that we've been funded completely through government funding to sponsor that team. So Senator Portantino gave a significant chunk last year, and I believe Congresswoman Judy Chu also gave a large portion of funding. So to the tune of about 1.8 million, if I'm not mistaken, little bit less than 1.8 million. So that has covered South Pasadena's funding to date, and we anticipate that moving forward. So we've been very fortunate with that.
And my last question is whether that team can help us with those, I don't know if you call them misdemeanors, but the ones that don't get booked through the jail. They have, like, you know, shoplifting or the minor crimes. I think that's what's contributing to a lot of the crime increase. And if those mental health teams could try to figure out what the social economic situation of those crimes or those the committers of those crimes are, do they have the bandwidth to do that?
They don't have, not the contract that we have. I know the county's looking at some larger studies to determine, especially when we're talking about the zero bail. That's one of the things the county's looking at studying, is what the recidivism rate is, what the cause is. I know there's a lot of discussion behind it, and certainly there's a lot of differing opinions, but that is not something that South Pasadena's contract with our mental health group is looking at. That might be something they would be able to take on in the future. Knowing where they're at now, I don't believe that's something, and I certainly could check, but I don't believe it's something that's within their capacity as of right now.
Thank you.
I just had a question on staffing. So looking at the vacancies and the injuries, it looks like you're down right now, like 1/3 of the full-time employees between vacancies and injuries,
Yes.
and half of part-time positions. So I'm just curious, when was the last time the department was fully staffed, or like almost fully staffed?
We're going back probably 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we looked at that chart that you put up of like the last decade or so, and would you expect to see some of the activity increase if you had more staff?
Calls for service and arrests and citations would certainly increase. For sworn personnel, we estimate anywhere between 800 to 1,000 calls for service every year for each sworn personnel that's out there. So we're talking about at least 12 sworn positions. So about 12,000 calls, give or take.
And you're able to respond to everything, whether or not you arrest. So like the changing policies in LA County, does that affect what you respond to? Or
No, South Pasadena, we are still committed to responding if residents call. And that's one thing I want to make clear, is while you may hear other law enforcement agencies on TV talking about responding to emergency 911 calls only, South Pasadena is still functioning as a full police department. We will respond if someone calls. The direction that we take after that is unrelated entirely to how we respond in police South Pasadena. So we're still there. If you call us, we will still maintain our minimum staffing levels, and we're doing so. We're just doing it through different means. We're trying to be more efficient. We're utilizing overtime in a different manner, but we are still available if anybody needs us. And you'll still see us out there doing the things that we are supposed to do. We're out there enforcing traffic. We may not get there as often as we, in terms of, we may not be as visible, simply because we just don't have the numbers to put excess personnel out in the field as we used to. But we're still out there every day on patrol, doing traffic enforcement and all the things that South Pasadena residents expect.
that's all.
All right. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cacciati, do you have anything for us today?
Testing, thank you. So there's a picture here and it follows up with the chief and our public safety recruitment and retention of our officers and staff. And this was a picture, actually, they had a big changeable message sign on Alhambra, on Atlantic, just south of the Garfield and Atlantic, just south of the movie theater, going north by Maine for several weeks. And then this massive poster about hiring officers at Alhambra. So I wanted you to see it, just as kind of following up and confirming what the chief said about the competition out there. And again, when I go to my meeting in Diamond Bar for AQM